yours, Alex.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm definitely going to try to make this an open discussion. I'm going to share examples from my experience with Truman's, and hopefully that's relevant to most of the folks joining or listening in the future, because it is a startup-oriented event. But when thinking about a marketing and sales technology stack, it's really critical to think about it in the context of your business. And even on this call, I know we have a pretty wide range of business types and business sizes. And so, a grain of salt, what I'm going to provide is my own experience and less of a prescriptive recommendation for how to build your own. And so the first thing I think, I'll share is we started Truman's about 2 years ago. It was my first startup. I was coming from not a major corporate role, but a much larger company, much more established, in-house developers. We built a lot of things ourselves. So this was my first go around. So, all of the mistakes I made, I'm sure are mistakes that others have made. But if I could go back in time to the very beginning, I wouldn't have started with a list of technologies that I thought we needed. I would have started with, how we were going to operate the business, how we were going to reach customers, what were these key strategies, and then how were we going to find technology that supported those strategies. We almost did those things in parallel, and I think a lot of times with startups, you're building the plane as you're flying it. And I would say that I probably rushed to get all of our ducks in a row, knowing that it was going to take time to onboard the platforms, knowing that it would take time to do integrations, to learn the tools. We were not starting out with a big team. Again, like many startups, it's just a couple of people. And so you're having to do all this yourself. So I rushed into it from the perspective of, okay, let's build this list of all of the things that I think need to be in a technology stack. And then let's go purchase them. Let's get them up to speed. So, again, hindsight being 2020, I think I would have started more with how are we going to engage with our customers? What's important, most important to us? And then, thought about it really from a rank order perspective to better manage the budget. To define this a little bit further, I don't want to assume, if somebody's thinking about a startup, a marketing technology stack is really all of the different levels of software that you would use to operate your business, whether that's your customer-facing website, your fulfillment system or ERP, communication tools, whether it's internal, such as email, customer service, or it's external, like ad tools. It's all of these different ways of interacting with the customer. And what's cool about running a startup now versus maybe even 10 years ago was that a lot of these are off the shelf, ready to go, plug and play type tools that you don't need to build from scratch. And again, I started with my previous company in 2008, left in 2017. So I saw a lot of transformation over that time, but it was crazy because we had just a complete mess of custom built things and off the shelf. And we were trying to patch them all together, and it was really expensive. Now, if you're a startup, it's a lot easier to find these tools and plug and play. So we knew from day one, based on some of our advisors and just other startups we talked to, that we wanted to be on Shopify. So that was kind of the heart. And the way we thought about it was, what is our CRM/e-commerce engine going to look like? And so for us, that was kind of the key tentpole around which we built all of the other solutions. So, we first drew the line in the sand by saying anything that we are going to build capability wise has to tie to Shopify. So we hitched our wagon to that horse. And, one of the things we can talk about as a group is whether that's smart, whether that's risky. If people have experience migrating on or off systems, they know that it's very tricky, especially the larger your organization gets, to move away from something. Big Ass Fans, again, prior to starting my own company, I was part of the transition from using our actual ERP, which is just the manufacturer bare bones inventory and kind of logistics framework, over to Salesforce, which most of you probably know the company Salesforce, very modern CRM. And that was a nightmare. And we were a relatively small company. I mean, it was probably $50 million at the time, but you think about, the hundreds of thousands of customers and information that has to be migrated. Again, it's really important to kind of think about the platform that you're going to hitch your wagon to and how you're going to scale that, even if it's a homegrown solution, because it may not seem like a problem now, but if you're planning on being around for the long haul, you really want to try to avoid any kind of mass migration. Now, the secondary things like email platforms, that can be a nuisance if you need to change, but less so than I would say your kind of your core CRM, your customer relationship manager, your database, your e-commerce engine. Anymore, a lot of those are one and the same. They can be separate. So you could run, you could run your e-commerce on Square, for instance, and then use HubSpot or something like that, or Salesforce as a database. And I think what's interesting is as technology continues to change and improve, a lot of these companies are bringing more and more capabilities in-house. So you have the option, if you want, to simplify the number of companies you're working with for the different solutions. So, that's also a consideration. If the trade-off there is, if they do a lot of things, they probably don't do a lot of things well. There's a convenience factor, but they may not be the best at email marketing or social listening tools or things of that nature. And so again, just starting with your goals is going to be the most important thing first, but definitely be thinking about scale in mind. So, to define a little bit more, I've shared kind of the broad definition of the marketing and sales stack as I see it. What goes under that? I really, for Truman's, I look at 4 key elements of it. And then there are some kind of sub-tier things that, like I said, are easier to swap in and out. For us, it's the CRM/e-com platform. And for us, that's Shopify. It's our email system because we are direct to consumer business. We're not retail. So we're providing order information, marketing updates, product updates, all via email. We use a tool called Klaviyo for that, which no doubt many of you are familiar with. That was something, and we could talk about this at some point, something we migrated over to. So we didn't start with Klaviyo, and I can certainly share why we ended up doing a migration less than a year into our business. The third one I'd say is customer service. And maybe less relevant if you're selling wholesale or if you're B2B, but for us, consumer facing, we are live chatting with customers. We're getting emails from them, contact form submissions, text messages, Facebook Messenger. There's a million ways for people to communicate with a brand nowadays. And we wanted one platform that pulled all of those different communications in, allowed us to track them, manage them, et cetera, and also plug in with our systems. So when a customer sends us a text message, we see all of their order information, we see their subscription information, we actually modify stuff in there without having to jump around to different platforms. So the third one, customer service, was really imperative for us being a DTC company. And then the fourth one I'd say is the fulfillment.
Hold on. Hey, Alex, what do you use for the third one?
Good call. Reamaze is the platform.
Reamaze? Okay.
And we actually re-platformed onto that too. So we started with gorgias.io, and it's gorgias, Gorgis. And we ended up going with Reamaze because they just had a better suite of tools. It was actually a little less expensive. They had more integrations. We weren't previously able to port in texting or social. Now that may have changed if they've added more features, but for us, we did a migration, again, a little bit painful, but early enough that it wasn't that big of a deal. In fact, we even exported and imported all of our old customer information into the new system, so it was archived.
Did you consider HubSpot in that? Because I think that's what we're about to go to.
We looked at
why
it
not?
as HubSpot we had originally as our email platform before we went over to Klaviyo. Okay. I didn't find HubSpot, and this could have been a me thing, as intuitive as I did Klaviyo for email. Okay. And we weren't using most of the features with HubSpot. They're more of one of those all-in systems where they provide a lot. So I think if you're able to use their systems well, then that's a great choice because, they're a reputable company. They have great customer service, and they have a lot of tools. We were simply overpaying for how we were using it in the beginning. I think Zendesk too for customer service is another good one. I think that's on the pricier side, but it's very popular with direct-to-consumer businesses and also strong from an integration standpoint.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
On
I'm
to number
glad you
4.
did. I promised I was going to share the platforms and then I glossed over it. And then on the fourth one is fulfillment, and we use ShipStation for that. And really what that allows you to do is tie directly into whether it's FedEx or USPS, your carrier, automatically apply postage to orders. We actually have it tied into our 3PL, so they pull orders directly out of ShipStation. Again, I'm less familiar with that landscape outside of ShipStation. I'm sure there are others, but it plays very nicely with Shopify. And we actually recently, this is more of an anecdote, put a layer in between Shopify and ShipStation so that I would have the ability to withhold products from orders that we were out of stock on so that the rest of the order could be shipped. And then I could push that part later. So that was something, again, there's just all these technologies that I would never even know existed. But we ended up putting a layer in between, and hopefully that's, a temporary thing. But if that's something anybody ever has trouble with, which is, we sell a lot of stuff, they get bundled, but we're out of stock on this. We don't want to wait 4 weeks to ship them. If we can ship everything else, then, happy to provide some guidance on that. But like I said, the CRM/e-com, email, customer service, and fulfillment to me are kind of the 4 key pillars of it. I'm not going to talk about things like Facebook Ad Manager, Google Analytics, a lot of those kind of free tools that I think are just, they have to be there. But there are some others that I think are useful. And again, considering the marketing stack, I think text messaging is, we use actually 2 different platforms for that. One called Postscript.io, and that's for collecting customer cell phone numbers and being able to interact with them, cart abandonment, win back, flows similar to what you would do in an email marketing program, but via text. And then we use Twilio, which is really an SMS and text and phone number like provider. And we use that for customer service. So that ties into the Reamaze platform. So if a customer texts 415 Truman's, it goes right into our system and we see it just like we would in email. And so that's a nice tool. We have a referral program that's through Swell, which was recently acquired by Yotpo, another large kind of giant in the consumer tech space. And they also have a review program, Yotpo. However, we're using a business called Stamped.io. Both of those I think are really useful tools for posting your reviews, soliciting UGC, anything customer facing like that. There's a landing page creation software called Unbounce that I think can be useful for a lot of companies if they want to test the on-site experience for folks coming off an email or coming off an ad. Makes it very easy to do A/B testing. Again, that plugs right in. And then there's one that I think is less, all of these other ones are really kind of customer facing additions that I'm talking about, but there is a software, and I apologize, the name is escaping me right now, that we've used that actually allows you to monitor sessions on your site. And some of you may be able to fill this in for me. It's anonymous, of course. I wouldn't know, Jennifer, if you were the one on my site, but your session's actually being recorded. And so I can see where you spend time, how much of the page you read, what you click for your specific session.
I know what you're talking about.
Is it called like Frog something? I feel like there's one called like Hot Frog or Hot Jar. Look at Patrick.
Jar. Alex, thank you. Hot Jar. Yes. That is, and that's amazing. I mean, we use that a lot in the beginning. We're doing less changes to our website now. But when you're really first starting out and you're thinking minimum viable product, you want to know what's interesting to people, that's really useful because it's not just the singular session that you view. It actually shows stats over time, like 75% of people make it to this part on your site. This link never gets clicked. And that's really valuable, I think, in the beginning, versus the traditional way of like sit in a room and you watch people browse your site. This brings a little bit of the analytics into it.
What was the name of the SMS text that you used with Twilio?
So Twilio integrates with Reamaze, our customer service platform. So that's where we receive and respond to text. The customer-facing texting, where you enter your number on our site and agree to that, is called Postscript.io. Postscript. And there are several. I think there's another one called Emotive. That's, for us, that's a really nascent space because, texting, as marketers, we've already ruined email. I think we're a little bit skittish about ruining text messaging for customers. That to me is a lot more intimate. And so even with opt-in permission, we're treading really lightly on that, because again, that's a tough area, I think, for marketers to break through. But if we can do it well, I think that's a really great area of opportunity. I'm sure you've all seen the stats that like 15% of emails get read, but like 99% of text messages get read. And so again, we're in more of an experimentation phase with that right now and collecting numbers for if and when we figure it out, but it's not a main part of our marketing strategy. So that, I'll pause there before I kind of move on to like, I think things to consider when selecting partners, and pause and see if anybody just had questions or again, other solutions to bring up as relates to the specific layers of the marketing stack.
Yeah, what's the A/B testing one again?
That's Unbounce.
Oh, okay, I did write that down. Because yeah, like some of the ones that Adam wants to use are like super expensive. Like Optimizely is one that he really wants, but we can't really afford that.
Google has one too, I believe,
okay.
and I can't remember the name on that either, but makes it very easy to set up an A/B test.
I had a ShipStation.
Go ahead, Allie.
Sorry, Mikey.
Go ahead.
ShipStation question, and maybe one of the components, and I don't know how you guys handle it at Truman, is I would say, is there a fifth one? Is an inventory, and where do you track your inventory?
Yeah,
I'm toying with using ShipStation.
So since we have a 3PL,
Oh, you do?
we're using their portal to track our inventory. It's not the most intuitive or elegant solution, but it's not something we own or operate. So yeah, that's why I didn't bring that, but that's a good point. I know Shopify has the ability to track inventory, but I can't speak knowledgeably to how well that works.
Okay. I think I'm going to try out the ShipStation one because we have like all of our Amazon stuff linked in it. We have our house.com, we don't sell on House anymore. Every channel is linked in, so it can reduce the inventory. But my question is to them, I guess, do they do any costing with that too? Because they're monitoring the sale cost when it comes through. Will it also reduce the inventory cost when it goes out? Because that would be awesome if it's like synced to my QuickBooks like that and I wouldn't have to manually do it. I'm going to ask ShipStation that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's not something we've had to face. And yeah, that's a good point too about your billing system. We use QuickBooks and is it bills.com or bill.com, to pay things. And that again ties all in to our systems. So, you can bring finance, even legal. One of the cool things about Shopify, and I'm not stumping for them in particular, because I'm sure a lot of the other platforms are doing the same thing, but there's actually an app store, no different than your phone. And so you can search and, while I may have talked about one for referrals or another for reviews, there's a dozen options every time. You can see pricing, you can look at reviews, watch videos of how it works. I think what's awesome is most of these offer trial periods. And again, they're plug and play. So whether or not you have a developer in-house or out of house, it's pretty easy to experiment with these different systems and then move on without having to pay a fortune. And again, it wasn't like that 10 years ago. So, we've got a huge advantage now that a lot of this stuff just ports in automatically.
Alex, how do you approach the cost benefit ratio of when you are interested in trying a new system? Obviously, the first things you mentioned were the first 4. How did you approach when you thought you needed a system like that to fill into your stack? When you end up doing your cost benefit ratio, decided it was needed, how did you approach the testing of a certain platform? How long did you run that test for, et cetera?
Yeah, those are great questions. I'll try to address them all, but if I gloss over anything, let me know. I think for the core ones, it's a different answer than sort of the ancillary ones. For the core ones, it's really about price is a consideration. You want to look and have a decent grounding. And a lot of times that can be challenging because there is a monthly fee, but then there's also transaction fees and other things like that, processing fees for payment. And so you want to make sure you're capturing the all-in cost of the platform. But really scalability was critical when kind of picking those 4 top ones for me, is making sure that we weren't going to have to re-platform often if possible. And the biggest mistake I made, and I'm sorry, Jennifer, this was just because of us, not you, was HubSpot. And the mistake was not that HubSpot was wrong, is that I wanted to have a CRM separate from Shopify at the time, because I knew HubSpot from Big Ass Fans. We had used it. I did not know Shopify. And I didn't realize how many of those things were native to Shopify or had very tight integrations. And so we were treating it as a very expensive database with a little bit of email marketing at the time. And so that was, of the kind of big 4, that one was the one that I felt like I made the biggest mistake on, and probably because it was the most expensive of any of our platforms. Again, I think, they all offer tiers. And so always start with the lowest tier if you're just starting out. Look for contract flexibility. I think we did a year deal with HubSpot. A lot of these are month to month. I would say most of them are month to month, and occasionally they'll try to lock you into 6 or 12. You're in a different position because you've been running your business for some time now. This was pre-sales of anything, so we really didn't know
Right.
what we needed. And so I would have put a sharper eye on flexibility and contract duration had I known.
Yeah. One thing about HubSpot I'll tell to the users or to the group here too is so we do use it a lot for the email and text marketing. We're actually going to move on to their chat and ticket platform as well, because one of our problems is we're on live chat for our ticketing system, and we'll get 10 emails from the same person, and then they'll send a text, and it's all going to different places. So we're actually going to move to HubSpot to have one conversation with the customer at one time. But one good thing about HubSpot is that it's not a contract, but they allow you to pay for an entire year with your user base right now. And so let's say your user base is growing at an extreme amount. You can basically lock in that number of users at a price right now for the next year. So now then when you get to the next year, it's a huge bump. But if you paid monthly, you're going to be paying for that increase in users every single month, which is interesting.
Really smart.
It's interesting. So we decided to do it this year. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, and a lot of the platforms are user-based, email is user. So the more email, actually, it's number of sends, but as your user base goes up, that impacts it. So, to the original question of thinking about cost benefit, I'd say spend some time understanding not understanding, but forecasting what your cost is going to be based on the way they set these up, because there's a flat fee, but then it scales. Even with the customer service platform, they can be based on tickets. Our first system was, our second system was based on users.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, on our side.
well, yeah, and live chat for us is actually really good. It doesn't charge on either. It charges us for the number of people we need to be online at once
Oh, that's
under our
awesome.
platform. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and like you were saying, having them all pull in is important because, you know, we get, if somebody sends us something in Facebook Messenger, it comes in. If somebody, you know, tweets at us, it comes in.
Yeah.
That was something we were struggling with, and I'm kind of like going back into the memory bank where, you know, our social person is on an app, and you know, having to respond to somebody who tweeted an issue, and the customer service person's dealing with them because they also sent an email, like you said, and it's just a little bit chaotic. The other thing that we found really useful was, you know, we get a lot of comments on our social posts and our ads, and having those come into our customer service platform made that a lot easier to deal with. You know, I think everybody in startup world knows what it's like to be a social media manager because we've all had to wear that hat, and there are no evenings, there are no weekends. You know, it's constant. And only, you know, becomes increasingly so as you expand and potentially go overseas. But we actually trained our customer service team in the Truman's voice to manage even stuff that isn't customer service, just comments that people make on ads. And because we just realized, like, we're not going to be able, unless we're going to pay for an expensive agency with around the clock, you know, service, we need to figure out a sustainable way of doing this. And since we have customer service staff, you know, 14 hours a day, it was like, let's just coach them on the difference between responding to, you know, somebody commenting in earnest or trolling or whatever it is versus somebody coming in with a very specific product question or need. But again, that was made possible by this system pulling in even comments, not just messages from Facebook, but comments on our posts. And that was one of the reasons that we re-platformed on that. Yeah, I mean, it's just the cost benefit is going to be different for every business. So I think general watch outs are takeaways here: understanding the actual cost structure, and being able to forecast what that means for you, how they bill, how often they bill, thinking about your use cases. Am I going to be able to get more mileage out of it because these systems are doing more and more and more, and you're overpaying if you're not using them to their full extent. And then the actual cost benefit analysis, which is more ROI driven, which on some it's a little bit more difficult because there's so many variables. I mean, could I do just as well on Stripe as I do in Shopify? You know, maybe, I don't know, or it's not Stripe, Squarespace. But I think when you start looking at things like referral marketing program, and this is something we're going through right now because it's time for us to renew, and we're telling them, like, for what we're paying you all, the ROI isn't there. Like, we're not generating enough revenue off this to pay the premium that, you know, you all have nice features, and that's why we upgraded, and we thought, oh, well, these nice features will drive more referrals for us. It hasn't been the case. And so, you know, some of it is simple dollars and cents. Like, are you seeing a return on your investment? Other things you really have to think about: the scalability, the feature set, whether it plays well with others. And that's more of a robust discussion than it is just a simple ROI calculation. So not really a one size fits all, but I think just the takeaway is that you should do that with each one. You should understand how much you're paying for it, and always keep an eye on alternatives, because, you know, good old capitalist America, there's 5 options for every technology we need, which is awesome because it, you know, helps keep prices low.
Do you think that answer, that it depends answer, also applies to how long you should be testing a new product or a new add to your stack?
Yeah, I mean, some things may take longer to manifest results. So that's probably tough to give a one size fits all answer. But like I said, I think they mostly offer free trial programs. So if you can align around what at least early indicators of success are, you should have time to try it before you buy it, which is nice. Again, it used to be, and still is in some ways, just resource intensive to get this stuff onboarded in the first place and connected. And so if you're using these out of the box type systems, that's one of the great advantages, is how quickly you can move things in and out as they fit your need.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
I know in a lot of these, there is a way to, I mean, I guess swell would be referrals, but what about tracking repeat customers? So would Reamaze and swell be like the combination of the two that would like say, hey, you ordered this last time, it looks like, you know, you should try this? Or is that website functionality, or is that an app, or what do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, getting into kind of the analytics, it's interesting because every platform has analytics.
Right.
And one thing we struggle with is, what is that single point of truth for data? And sadly, I think the answer is there isn't one. You know, when in doubt, we try to use Google Analytics because it's sort of your nonpartisan tool, whereas all the other platforms kind of want to take credit for sales. But what I'll say is, analytics isn't going to give you that rich of data on an individual customer. You know, it's more of like conversion data and web data. And so, you know, with that example specifically, we would be using Shopify to look at repeat. And if you're saying, well, we want to understand specifically what drove repeat, we would say, well, let's look at email and, you know, in Klaviyo and see how well our win back series is working at pulling customers back in. Let's look at our subscription platform, which I haven't even talked about because it aggravates me to no end that Shopify hasn't built a native solution for it. But we have a subscription platform. So if you go through our site, if you buy a la carte versus a subscription, you have two different carts, which is just mind-blowing to me that Shopify hasn't taken over the subscription side of it yet. So yeah, so that makes data even more challenging because it goes through two different carts and transactions. And so like when you look at our conversion rate in Shopify, it's wrong because it's not counting transactions that happened on recharge. And so we can use some data in Shopify, but in others we have to look at Google Analytics. There are companies, we're not big enough yet to make this investment because for the most part, you know, we're able to generally know what's going on. But there are companies that exist solely to build a layer on top of all of this nonsense and be able to give you actionable insights. If anybody's looking for one, I know a great one in Seattle called Sound Commerce. Really awesome group. We've talked to them. Again, we're just a little small at this point to make that investment. But as businesses get more complicated and there's 1,000 different ways to slice data, really valuable to think about adding something like that to the stack. We used Power BI at Big Ass Fans, which was a Microsoft tool for data visualization. And we actually had all of our systems, customly connected to a data warehouse, which then fed into Power BI. And you know, if you wanted to know the average size of fan we sold in Montana in 2006, like that's the kind of stuff you just do a quick search and query and be able to do. So again, there are others out there, other tools, but you know, we found that a lot of the just startup out of the box stuff works for us today because it's pretty easy to understand our data.
Yeah, we just went to Domo. It's one of the big ones.
Domo?
Yeah, and if anybody on this call wants to know, I basically looked at 34 different ones because we decided we were big enough to need a BI, business intelligence, and I did trials with like 5 different ones, and I put it in our data on all of them. Domo's nice because it's very user-friendly, and they've got over 500 sort of native connections that, you know, if you can go grab a key and a client ID from an API, which sounds maybe hard, but once you have that, then you can connect to all your different data sources and then start building out your visualizations. And I like it so far. We're in the middle of like kind of, you integrating all the data sources that we have. I like it.
That's awesome. I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with the tool. It looks like Patrick had an option too. Do you want to elaborate on that, Patrick?
Oh yeah, Tableau. That's the big one all the sports teams use.
Yeah, it's a pretty hefty piece of software. It's really built for in-depth analysis. For my company, I've been building out dashboards and things like that for management, but I didn't get the chance to really trial a bunch of different types. I've looked at Power BI, and it's got a lot more functionality than Power BI. It's more, Power BI seems like it's more along the lines of showing dashboards and things like that, whereas Tableau is geared more toward analysis. But yeah, if you can connect to the database, you can pull the data and do the analysis. It can be a little bit of a pain to connect to certain APIs if they don't have a dedicated integration, but you can build out what they call a web data connector to connect to any open API as well, but it's just a little bit more of a pain.
Untitled Firm obviously is a dashboard builder as well. I tried to get them for a session to kind of go along with Alex's, and they're obviously hard at work with their startup, but that's another one to consider. Tableau, I've only really witnessed as more of a visualization tool for data, but I'm not as accustomed to it as well. So thanks for adding that, Patrick.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of the platforms, smaller ones, are like for the different tools, try to sell analytics as like an upsell. Our review system tried to sell us on advanced analytics and customer sentiment, which we don't need at this point, but we did buy. So Recharge is our subscription platform, and the cohort analysis that they provide is actually really useful to us for doing, massive pivot tables for everything, being able to see, customers when they came in, churn over time, value over time. I mean, there's just a lot of useful tools there. So, we're bridging towards maybe a bigger integrated platform, but, to Allie's original question, we use a lot of the kind of base analytics tools that exist within our email referral, subscription services. And again, that's worked for us for now. And, I want to kind of talk about some of the key takeaways, but the one of them is that when you're starting out, like, don't assume you need more than the base features. It's easy enough to upgrade. Again, that was one of the mistakes I made. I think I got, big eyes for how cool some of this stuff was, but you end up not using a lot of it. And so start basic, avoid excessive customization. That stuff is difficult to unwind and can cause breaks. We've seen, and they've been minor for us, fortunately, where we've done some customization, then we change something else on our site, not realizing the domino effect that it has, and we've had some breaks that way. I think marketers tend to think we're more special than we are, and so our brands are more special, not us as individuals. We're all special individuals. But we tend to think like, oh, well, it has to be this way for us because of X, Y, and Z. And I think generally speaking, that's not the case. Again, you'd rather, miss 5% of, potential sales and probably have it be just right for the 95% of use cases that are coming in versus being sloppy for everybody. And so, again, you can customize as you go, but start just with sort of a base model. I think having a contractor is another useful tool. Again, it depends on your resource level, but there are relatively inexpensive folks who all they do is work in these systems, whether it's, Shopify or Squarespace, and can help get things off the ground if you're either A, not comfortable with it, or B, just tied up running the business. And so we relied on somebody that wasn't, necessarily going to be a long-time partner, but as we were brand new, non-technical co-founders, we definitely leaned on some outside help with somebody who knew the platform inside and out. And then, yeah, just not over engineering to start. I mean, we've added things in as we've gone. Like, we didn't start with text messaging and we didn't start with live chat. We sort of built up to where we are. And as we were just discussing with like the overall data visualization and management tools, we're not even there yet. But, you know, these are things, the beauty of these stacks, these modern day stacks, is that they're easy to build on top of as you go. And I just, again, if I could go back and tell myself 2 years ago, I'd say you just don't need that much to start with. Figure out, you know, what's going to be valuable, and then build. We didn't make, I don't think we made a ton of mistakes, and certainly nothing irreparable. But yeah, I think everything looks so great. It's like a menu at a fancy restaurant because they have all these slick tools, but they build them, you know, for a lot of their enterprise clients that, you know, have large staff. And, you know, a 2% optimization when you're doing $100 million a year is a lot different than, you know, when you're a pre-revenue startup and you're just figuring it out. And so, you know, I even talked to a company today that is doing some interesting things by engaging with people that are on your site. Not to go too far into it, but they even said at your size, it probably doesn't make sense because their gains are so incremental for what their software brings that, you know, unless you're doing a certain size of business, it's not going to be noticeable for you. So that's definitely something, you know, just again, if you're in the very early building stage, to think about just starting with a more basic package. I think with, you know, we've got about, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
What would you say you used for subscription platform?
It's called Recharge. I'm familiar with another one called Charge B, B as in like Bumblebee. I've not used it, but there aren't a lot of options, at least in the Shopify network, for subscription businesses, which again is crazy considering how many subscription businesses rely on them. They did announce, I think over a year ago, that they're going to do it, but there hasn't really been much out publicly since then. So we'll see. And the tough thing with Recharge, again, if it's useful for anybody to hear about it, is it's a big part of your shopping experience, but it's not very custom. And so it looks different from your site. There are emails that trigger from it that, you know, are difficult to replace with, you know, Klaviyo or Shopify because it's tied to specific actions, i.e. if you cancel your subscription, that email comes from Recharge. And if you order something, that email comes from Shopify. If you abandon cart, that email comes from Klaviyo. And so that's a bit of the mess with not having it all integrated. And where something like HubSpot, you know, the nice thing about that is it can wear multiple hats and be a little bit more seamless. So there are definitely trade-offs as far as that goes. Like, I think Klaviyo is an amazing email marketing tool, but you know, its integrations with Recharge and Shopify do have limits. So it really is the big like pros and cons list as you're working through this. And then if you wanted to be super rigid and analytical about it, you know, you could do a forced ranking on them by features. So like, I don't know if you all ever do this, I'm kind of dorky, but a weighted scale where, you know, if price is most important to you, you know, that's worth 3 points. If convenience, you know, is worth a certain amount of points, and you go through and you just, as a team, you all do it separately. You rank these things, and then you come up with the number that shows you which one you want to go with based on how you've ranked them. So anyways, it's definitely a lot to consider. And that's, again, just to beat a dead horse, start very basic, because you're probably going to miss what you need until your business has matured to a certain point where you really understand the way your customers are communicating with you, the way they're converting, all those things. I know we've only got a little bit left, like what, 10 or 15 minutes. Does anybody have any stories from their experience that they want to share? I've talked a lot about, you know, what we do, but I'd love to hear from the group.
So Adam will tell you all day long that we should have done Shopify because some of the coupons and other features that we use a lot of is much more intuitive. So we're on WooCommerce as well, like Ali. And the problem with WooCommerce is we've butchered it and customized it so much over the years. And we've only had it, we migrated to WooCommerce in 18. So we've only had it like 2.5 years, but we can't even install a regular plugin. Like it won't work. And so it sucks because, you know, it's supposed to scale, but if you can't install plugins and use them off the shelf as they're built, and you have to step into each one and change it, then it gets really cumbersome. So we're not even sure if Shopify would work, but like, so we're even to the point probably where our next site is going to be custom because there's just too many things we want to do. But then, you know, the risk you get into with that is that your code gets stale and stale and stale, you know, versus some of these platforms are better because at least they're releasing new versions, you know. But every time WooCommerce releases a version, we're totally effed because we have to, everything breaks. So
We're going through the exact same stuff, and ours isn't as comprehensive as yours, Jen. But at this point, now I'm trying to like find a Woo contractor that I can afford to hard code all of the plugins that we've used because it's so bogged down with plugins that we can get the site speed going. And it's just like, I don't know. The reason we stuck with WooCommerce was because we had so many blogs and they said, oh, for SEO, you should just stay on it, stay on it, stay on it. And Google already likes your site the way it is. And they're like, if you switch to Shopify, you're going to lose all your SEO ranking. And we had paid an SEO person. And now I'm like, I don't know. I just see a very expensive price tag in my future. So I'm like, do you just keep making this work until you can't? I don't know.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's never like one right answer because it's all, each solution is going to come with its own set of problems. The custom thing's tough if you don't have a dedicated staff because you're right, you're going to be like putting out fires forever. We had Magento at Big Ass Fans, which is another big platform. And I think it was $1 million a year, if I'm not mistaken, was what we paid for the platform. And we weren't even that big of an e-commerce company. I mean, we had our direct consumer line, but most of our sales were over the phone still. And so it's just a ball of wax, I think, you know, and I mean, I'm definitely, I was so soured from that experience and that cost that I advocate for some of these simple, like integration type things, but I definitely get that there are limitations too. And fees on fees on fees.
Have any of you guys that are at a larger scale considered larger platforms like NetSuite or what's the other one I was just thinking of? Odoo. I don't know if you've ever heard of Odoo. ODOO.
Do they
They're
have
both
shopping carts?
Yes. So they're full blown ERP software.
Okay.
So they have everything from A to Z pretty much in terms of inventory, and they have website builders and stuff built in too, but you wouldn't necessarily have to use that.
Right.
I've never really been in the e-commerce space, but I just think about platforms like Shopify and them. Yes, they're huge, but are they really built for large scale e-commerce companies?
Right. Yeah. If you think about the biggest companies out there, I'd love to know what they're on because it's probably not Shopify or WooCommerce.
Yeah.
Has anyone heard of BigCommerce? I don't know about that one, but I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with it though.
Yeah, I'm not either. Like, I don't know if it's a competitor of Shopify and WooCommerce or if it's like a step above that.
I think it is.
A competitor?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder if there's I can look at this, if there's an analysis online of when it makes sense to go fully custom based on fees, because you're right.
Yeah.
A large direct consumer business like a Nike probably doesn't want.
Right.
Hey.
Yeah. Like you kind of wonder, like
every one of its yeah.
Or
I don't know. I think
Wayfair, yeah, any of the big e-com sites, like what are they all using? That'd be a nice research. Get on it, Mikey. Set your intern on some research.
I should. I gotta get an intern.
I think most of those big companies have their own custom software and they have in-house website developers.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Because I work at Apex Software and we do website development, but the companies bigger than that, they have their own staff of software developers.
Yep.
You got to think too that the tech stack that you end up developing is almost a piece of your secret sauce. But thank you, Alex, for telling us yours. But I mean, how you approach your processes and how you eliminate time sucks and open up those bottlenecks, that is a piece of your secret sauces. So they might not want to tell half the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they're just resourced differently and they need probably flexibility and agility. I mean, if you're Nike and you want to do something completely new and different that nobody's ever seen before, you're not going to want to work within a system that you don't control. So yeah, I mean, I think this being more oriented towards startups, I definitely think in the early days, you can't go wrong because again, even a migration, we've migrated email systems and customer service, which were two of my, big four, and it wasn't that painful because we did it early enough. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that I've got any other wisdom to impart or that I even imparted any wisdom to begin with. But if anybody ever needs to chat on this stuff or trade notes on systems, I'm always available and more than happy to.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
I have a whole page of notes, actually.
Well, thank you for joining.
Yeah, I'm going to do Adam's session next, too.
Is that coming up next?
That is next.
I think so, right?
Or no, 4 o'clock.
Yeah, that's next.
Oh,
yeah,
4 o'clock. That one.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alex. Really appreciate it, man. I actually own a house cleaning company, and we're actually trying to get into the commercial cleaning space too. And we've reached out to you guys to potentially start using your cleaning products. So really look forward to doing that at some point. Right now, we're still using independent contractors, so we can't really dictate what cleaning products they use and all that kind of stuff. But as soon as some of all the craziness that's going on right now starts dying down and we get a little more business, we're hoping to start hiring. And at that point, we'll start ordering our own cleaning products and things like that. So
Cool.
Just a side note.
Yeah, let's connect.
Any other questions for Alex? Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Alex, for your time. I'm hitting